Today, what we're doing is section 9.2, solving quadratic equations by finding square roots. And the goal is I can solve quadratic equations by finding square roots. First, let's do some warm-ups. All right, on to the notes. First, a quadratic equation. Is an equation that can be written in the standard form, ax squared plus bx plus c equals 0. There are various methods to solve quadratic equations. Let's take a look at one method. Example 1. Solve the equation. Write the solution as integers if possible. Otherwise, write them as radicals. Well, in order to get rid of the square root sign, what we need to do is we need to do the inverse of the square, which in this case is the square root. Now, if I do this, the square and the square root cancel, so I'm left with x. Now, anytime I have an equation where I take the square root of both sides, I have to remember that I'm going to have two answers. I'm going to have one answer being positive and another answer being negative. So I know x equals plus or minus 2, which is equivalent to saying x equals 2 and x equals negative 2. On number 2, in order to get the squared out of there, what I need to do is I need to take the square root of both sides. Now to do this, I know that the square and the square root cancel each other out, so I'm just left with n. Over here, since I took the square root of both sides, I'm going to have to write plus or minus the square root of 5. All right, time for you to do some practice. Go ahead and try number 1. The answer to number 1 is we have to take the square root of both sides. We get x equals, since we took the square root of in an equal sign with an equal sign, it's going to be plus or minus 9. So x equals plus or minus 9. Number 2, go ahead and try it. What we need to do is we need to take the square root of both sides. So this will be n is equal to the square root plus or minus the square root of 10. All right, go try number 3. To get the answer, we have to take the square root of both sides. Now, if I do this, this will be x is equal to, we have to write the plus or minus. Square root of 0 is 0. We know anytime we have plus or minus, plus 0 is the same thing as minus 0, so the best answer that we can put is not plus or minus 0, but just saying 0. All right, go ahead and try number 4. The correct answer for number 4 is by taking the square root of both sides. I get y is equal to plus or minus the square root of negative 1. Now we have a problem because remember, we cannot have a negative square root. So in this case, our answer is going to be no real solutions. Example number 2, we want to solve the equations. So in order to solve the equations, our goal is trying to get the x by itself. We are going to first add or subtract. So the very first thing that we want to do when we're doing these problems is we want to add or subtract. If we can't add or subtract, or if we already did it, the second thing that we want to do is we want to multiply or divide. So on the first one, we want to add or subtract. So we are going to add 48 to both sides. If it helps, don't forget to draw your barrier, so that way the left side stays on the left and the right side over there. And what we do to one side, we have to do to both sides. This gives us 3x squared equals 48. Next, what we're going to do is we are going to do our multiplication or division. So we're going to divide by 3. When I divide by 3, I get x squared equals 48 divided by 3, which is 16. Next, we are going to get rid of the square. We do that by taking the square root of both sides. This will give us x equals, don't forget your plus or minus, square root of 16 is 4. Number 2. First thing that we want to do is we want to add or subtract. I'm going to draw my line down here so that I know what I do to one side I have to do to both sides. I'm going to begin by subtracting 27. When I subtract 27, I now have negative 3y squared is equal to negative 27. Next, I'm going to multiply or divide. In this case, since negative 3 is being multiplied by y squared, I'm going to divide both sides by negative 3. Y squared is equal to positive 9. We have to take the square root of both sides, get rid of the square, so this will give us y equals, don't forget your plus or minus, 3. All right, why don't you go ahead and try the U practice for number 1. The answer is, add 150 to both sides. This gives you 6x squared equals 150. Divide by 6. X squared is equal to 25. Take the square root of both sides. This gives you x equals plus or minus 5. Number 2, if you have 2x squared minus 72 equals 0, first thing that we want to do is we want to add or subtract. So we're going to add 72. If I add 72, then what I'm going to do is, get that on the other side, then I'm going to divide by 2. So x squared is equal to 36. To get rid of the square, I have to take the square root of both sides, and I get x is equal to plus or minus 6. Go ahead and try number 3. All right, the correct answer for number 3, first thing we have to do is we have to subtract 30. This gives you 7x squared equals negative 21. Divide both sides by 7. X squared equals negative 3. We want to take the square root of both sides, and we get x equals plus or minus the square root of negative 3. And we know that for this right here, we can't take the square root of a negative number, so our answer is going to be no real solutions. All right, try number 4. First thing that we need to do is we need to add or subtract. So I'm going to subtract 13. I have 2y squared equals 41 minus 13, which is 28. Divide both sides by 2. Y squared is equal to 14. Take the square root of both sides. So y is equal to plus or minus the square root of 14. And that is your answer.